Hey guys, Kevin from the Forge here, ready to catch you up on what happened at the Forge last night. Forge Local 222. We continued our trek through the book of Joshua, the making of a man, and we were in Joshua chapter 8, considering how do we overcome failure. And that's a big subject, right? I mean, we all fail. We all come up short sometimes, and it can be in all sorts of different ways. It might be a failure at our workplace. It might be a failure in some sort of project or endeavor we're taking on in our personal life. It might be a failure of a relationship, a marriage. Maybe we feel like we're failing in raising our kids. We could fail in all sorts of ways, all sorts of things. We might come up short or have things not turn out quite the way we hoped or wanted them to. What do we do with that? And how do we move forward? How do we overcome it? Not just be paralyzed in the failure. We got to know how to do that, because fail we will do, and we will come up short. And so Joshua, he's trying to figure out how to do that very same thing. And the Lord opens up Joshua chapter 8, giving some key instructions to Joshua on how to do that. If you remember, the people of Israel had this great victory over Jericho. Now they're moving on, and they're going to attack the city of Ai, and they attack it, and it's a small city. They don't feel like there's much of a fighting force there, and so they only send a few thousand people in to fight, and it ends up they get trounced. People of Israel get pushed back. Men die, and it's this terrible loss. And Joshua feels like, man, it's all over. God's abandoned them. They are doomed to be wiped off the face of the earth, Joshua says. And so he doesn't respond to it very well. And he probably made some key errors in the beginning as well, planning for that attack and not being preemptive in seeking the Lord's favor moving into that attack. Because ultimately, of course, that's what the problem was. The biggest problem was that someone, Achan, had taken something in that battle for Jericho that he should not have taken. And so there was sin in the camp, and God was bringing judgment because of that sin. And so they figured that out. They dealt with it. But now they've got to decide what's next. What are we going to do now? They're facing a battle against this city that had just defeated them. And now they've got to decide what's going to happen. What comes next? How do we pick ourselves up and move forward? That's what we need to know. So let's take a look, Joshua chapter 8, and I'm going to try to roll through this super quick because I had a lot of points that I pulled out of here, and so I just want to touch on each one real quick. There's like 8 of them, but I want you to see them. So Joshua chapter 8, verse 1, then the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. So how do we overcome failure? First thing is we can't give in to fear. You can't give in to fear. That's the temptation. That's what we're prone to do. What if I fail again? What if it doesn't work out again? What if I look like a fool? What if? And that's all fear. And so we can't give in to that. We can't resist going into the next battle because of how the last battle turned out. That's fear-based living, and we cannot do it. And the Lord tells Joshua, you cannot do it. It's going to paralyze you. Do not be afraid. And then he says, do not be discouraged. Okay? So we cannot give into discouragement. That's number 2. We can't give into discouragement. That's easy to do when we fall short, when something doesn't turn out. You can give into discouragement, thinking that, you know what, this is the end of the road. This is not going to happen, or this is the best things are going to be, or I guess this is what I'm resigned to. That's the way Joshua was feeling in the last chapter. We're going to be wiped off the face of this earth because of what happened in this battle that we lost. Can't give in to discouragement. Can't look at failure as an end. Hope is not lost. Okay? It is not over. Having a failure, coming up short, it's just part of being a human being. And And so we can't let it overwhelm us. And so the Lord's telling Joshua that. Do not give in to fear. Do not be discouraged. Then look at what he says. He gives him some instruction. He says, take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Except you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Interesting. Okay? So, how do we overcome failure? We don't give in to fear. We don't give in to discouragement. And we don't think that failure disqualifies us from the presence and the power and the working of God in our life. Because that's another temptation that comes at us when we fail. We think, God's going to abandon us. God's not going to be with us. God's not going to show up anymore because we blew it, because we came up short. It's easy to talk ourselves into that. God's hand isn't with me. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, God's hand is with you. He wants to help you. He wants to lead you. He wants to fight for you. He does. And that's what he tells Joshua. He says, hey, get up and back into the fight. Get back into the battle. You need to go. I'm going to give you the victory. Okay? My power, my presence, it's going to be with you. I will give you the victory. And not only that, he does a cool little thing here. He tells the people that they are allowed to carry off plunder and livestock for themselves. See, that's different than in the previous fight in Jericho. They were instructed, don't take anything for yourselves. No plunder. Don't take any of the spoils of war for yourself. And of course, Achan did it anyway, and that's what brought on all sorts of trouble. But now, the Lord says, it's all right. Go ahead and take some plunder for yourselves. Enjoy the spoils of victory. And you know what that is? That's just a little bit of grace to them. You might think, I might think that, after this big failure and this rebellion of Achan and Joshua's poor response, that, maybe God would get a little more restrictive. Like, isn't that our first thought? Oh, God's gonna clamp down here. God's gonna be harsher. God's going to tighten the boundaries up. No, he actually loosens them. He actually just gives them a little grace, a little favor. He says, all right, when you have this victory, go ahead, enjoy the plunder. Take some of it. And it's just this demonstration in another way that, hey, he's with them. Okay? So don't give in to the thought that a failure or a shortcoming has disqualified you, that God's put you on a shelf, that he's done with you. It's not true. It's not true. Okay? Then, end of chapter 8, verse 2, the Lord gives a very simple instruction to Joshua. Set an ambush behind the city. Set an ambush behind the city. Okay? So he gives them just a very clear battle plan. Do this one by ambush. Okay? And so my point in overcoming failure here is just listen to God. Listen to God for his instructions. Like, hey, we failed. We came up short. Things didn't work out. God, what do you want me to do next? Because that's all that matters. It doesn't matter, the failure's over. The coming up short's in the past. It doesn't really matter. You can do nothing about it. The only thing that you can do is choose what's next. And to choose what's next, you got to listen to the Lord. And so the Lord here tells Joshua, set an ambush. That's how you're going to win this victory. Ambush. And so he listens to the Lord, and that's what we need to do. You want to overcome a failure, listen to God for what's next. All right. Then the next thing, how do we overcome failure? Number 5, make a plan. Make a plan. Verse 3 and beyond says, so Joshua, after he gets this command, set an ambush behind the city. So Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack Ai. And he chose 30,000 of his best fighting men. Only sent 3,000 last time. All right, he's going all in this time. He's going to get the victory. He's coming full force. Chose 30,000 of his best fighting men. and sent them out at night with these orders. Listen carefully. You're to set an ambush behind the city. Don't go very far from it. All of you will be on alert. I and all those with me will advance on the city. And when the men come out against us, as they did before, we will flee from them, setting a trap. Okay? We will flee from them, and they will pursue us until we have lured them away from the city. For they will say, they are running away from us as they did before. And so when we flee from them, you rise up from the ambush and take the city. And he goes on, he's got some other specific instructions, but he gives them this detailed plan on how we're going to set the ambush, how we're going to carry it out, how we're going to do what the Lord has called us to do. And so if you want to get back into the win column, if you want to have victory in your life, if you want to move forward in your life, you got to listen to God, and then you got to make a plan. Okay, how can I do what God's called me to do? What's my part? What's the wisest way to go about this? Just because the Lord says, hey, I'm with you, I'm going to give you the victory, here's some general instructions, what you need to do. You know what? There are a lot of other choices to make, and you've got to make them. And you seek the Lord for His help and for His guidance, but you've got to make them. You've got to make the plan. You've got to execute the plan. And so we got to do that. That's what Joshua did here. Okay? And that gets him on this road to victory. A couple more things. Verse 18. So they're in the midst of this battle, and the Lord said to Joshua, hold out toward Ai, the javelin that is in your hand. For into your hand I will deliver the city. And so Joshua held out his javelin toward Ai. And now verse 26, for Joshua did not draw back the hand that held out the javelin until he had destroyed all who lived in Ai. And so there's this scene where the Lord tells Joshua to hold out this javelin. It's like a spear with a banner on it that everybody could see. And he's holding it up. He's holding it out toward the city. And he does it for the entire battle so that everybody can see it. And it's this demonstration that, hey, we are dependent on the Lord. And the Lord is with us. And the Lord is going to bring victory. It reminds you back in Exodus 17 of Moses holding his hands up. And as long as he held his hands up toward the Lord, they had victory. They were winning. And when his arms dropped, they were losing. He's having Joshua do the same sort of thing here. And so what that tells us about overcoming victory is we've got to trust God. Okay? Number 6 is you got to trust God. This act by Joshua, that act by Moses, it's just a representation of our pursuit of the Lord and our trusting of the Lord, our seeking the Lord in the things that we're doing. If you want to get out of failure and back into victory, get back into success, man, you got to trust the Lord in it. You got to trust Him in all of it. And that's just common sense. It's just, basic fundamental Christianity. But we dare not forget it. We've got to trust Him all the time in all things. You got to trust Him today with whatever's going on in your life. Want to overcome failure? You got to trust the Lord. And then number 7, I would say this: go for absolute victory. Like if you're going to do something, do it all the way. Like if you want to win, if you want to make a change, if you want something to get better in your life, if you want to overcome a failure and turn it around, like you have to go for it completely, 100%, all in. That's what Joshua does here. Look at some of these verses. Chapter 8, verse 22. It says, the men of the ambush also came out of the city against them, so that they were caught in the middle with the Israelites on both sides, and Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivors nor fugitives. Verse 24, when Israel finished killing all the men of Ai in the fields and in the desert where they had chased them, when every one of them had been put to the sword, that's when the Israelites returned to Ai, and then they destroyed all that were there. Okay. Verse 26, again, Joshua holds out the javelin until all who lived in Ai were defeated and destroyed. Verse 28, so Joshua burned Ai and made it a permanent place of ruin. Like, man, we just defeated this place, now we're going to burn it to the ground. Joshua's going for absolute, complete, no question victory. And guys, so often in our life, we give a half-hearted effort to things. Try to overcome something. We try to do something half-hearted. We don't go all in. We've got to be men who go all in. That's what Joshua did. There's going to be no doubt. There's going to be no defeat. There's not going to be any question what happened in the second battle with Ai. They were going to win the victory. And it was going to be complete. And so whatever you want to do, decide that you're going to do it. And that it's going to be an absolute victory. And don't stop until you get there. That's what God calls us to do in our life. That's what Joshua did. And then the last thing, how do we overcome failure? Man, when we get the new victory, you know what? Celebrate it. Celebrate it. That's what they do in the rest of chapter 8. Joshua builds an altar, and they have a celebration, and they seek the Lord, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, and that's a good way to end. When we overcome failure, when we get back into victory, man, enjoy it. Celebrate it. Praise God for it. Give Him glory in it. So, there it is, guys. Joshua chapter 8, making of a man. That's how you overcome failure. Get after it.